Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Alexandra Caney from LiveWell, Colorado. Thank you so much for your patience as we were dealing with a couple of technical difficulties, but we are back on track. Thank you again for joining us. This webinar will be recorded and it will be available tomorrow morning on the LiveWell Colorado website. To access the webinar recording as well as the presentation that you will see on your screen today, visit livewellcolorado.org, click on LiveWell's commitment, select Research and Publications, and there you will see all of the LiveWell Colorado webinars available for your use. Second, we will have some time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, so if possible, please let us know who your question is directed to, and you can type it in on your on-screen control panel, and we will read those aloud and answer those at the end of the webinar. With that, I would like to turn it over to our first presenter of the day, Julie George.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. This is Julie George. Welcome to the webinar to both our regular food systems participants and our Heal Cities and Towns participants as well today. I'm going to move quickly since we're a few minutes behind. So our objectives for today is I'm going to talk a little about the Heal Cities and Towns campaign. And then we will hear from the cities of Aurora, Cortez, and Fort Collins about the work they're doing to strengthen local food economies. And we'll hear about the tie between local policies and impact on healthy behaviors. You'll get some tips. And like I already said, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Heal Cities and Towns campaign and how that can help municipal leaders strengthen access to healthy foods in their communities. So our speakers today, so myself, I've been with LiveWell Colorado for about a year. Prior to working at LiveWell, I was the Director of Government Relations for the Colorado Association of School Boards, and prior to that, I worked for the City of Aurora. So it's a new field for me, but it's great working with our local governments on healthy eating and active living. From Aurora, we have Libby Tart-Schoenfelder, and Libby is a Senior Planner 2 at the City of Aurora. She's worked in local government for over 8 years. Libby is a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and serves on the American Planning Association of Colorado's Sustainability Committee. At the City of Aurora, she is responsible for reviewing proposed development, researching sustainable code, and writing code amendments. And she likes working with the development community to create a variety of diverse projects. From Cortez, we have Kirsten Sackett, and Kirsten has been with the City of Cortez since 2006. She is a native of Utah and moved to Cortez. She accepted an internship position with the city planner, and she has stayed. And over these 7 years, working for the City of Cortez, she is now the Director for the Department of Planning and Building. And Kirsten is currently a member of the local food task force, which is an advisory group to LiveWell Montezuma, which has spent the last 2 years developing a local food assessment report. The group is now aiming to formally align itself as a state-recognized food coalition in order to continue the work of bringing local healthy food to all tables in Montezuma County. And then our last speaker for today is Lindsay X, and Lindsay is a senior environmental planner with the City of Fort Collins. Lindsay has led the development of the urban agriculture regulations for Fort Collins, including allowing market gardens and community gardens in all zone districts, allowing poultry to be raised, and removing barriers to year-round growing of food. Lindsay assisted in the development of a local food cluster and helping the community to identify and remove any policy barriers to urban agriculture. All right. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes here at the beginning to tell everybody a little bit about the Heal Cities and Towns campaign. For those of you who aren't familiar with the acronym HEAL, it stands for Healthy Eating, Active Living. And the campaign is a partnership between LiveWell Colorado and the Colorado Municipal League. And we are currently funded through a 3-year grant from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment using tobacco settlement funds. So the reason for the campaign is traditionally municipal governments haven't, the health and wellness hasn't traditionally been a focus of municipal governments, but the work that municipal governments do has a strong impact in the way residents live and whether they have access to safe transportation other than in vehicles, good parks and rec, things of that nature. So the campaign has started to work with municipal leaders to make the tie between policies that they pass and access to healthy eating and active living. There is a very strong tie between healthy communities and a strong positive economy. People like to live in places where there's a lot of good energy, where they can walk and bike and be outside with their families, especially here in Colorado. And businesses like to locate in places where there's thoughts about living healthy lives. And also it's great for tourism. So we have a pretty good tourist economy here in Colorado, and healthy eating and active living really fits into promoting that in our local communities. And really the campaign is focused on no and low-cost solutions, and that's, again, types of policy focus. And the reason we're focused on policy is it sets a roadmap for the future. If you get the vision down as municipalities work through their budget cycles, their policies and guiding documents, set a vision, and then resources can go towards infrastructure and things that make access to healthy living and healthy eating and active living easier for their residents. And there's 3 areas of focus for the campaign, and obviously one of them is access to healthy food, and that's why we're doing this webinar together. But the 2 other areas of focus are active community, so that's thinking about access to walkability and bikeability and safe routes to places, safe crosswalks, connectivity between places that people want to be, schools, parks, municipal buildings, rec centers, things of that nature. And then the healthy workplace. And the healthy workplace is only focused on the municipal workplace under the campaign, and it's just about helping municipal leaders create environments where their employees have access to healthy active living while they are at work. So there's 4 levels to the campaign: eager, active, fit, and elite. And we hope that as cities and towns come into the campaign at either the eager or active level, that then they will seek to continue onto the higher levels and really make meaningful difference and sustainable difference within their communities. And as a member of the campaign, each municipality receives some promotional materials, use of the logo. We provide you with a media toolkit that has a press release and sample newsletter articles. You'll get a plaque to display in your municipal building. And then along with that, you'll get free technical assistance from LiveWell Colorado to help you work through the policies that you're working on. We can make connections with experts in those areas, depending what it is you're wanting to do. And then also, we're really trying to tie participants in the campaign with financial resources, so grant opportunities and things of that nature with some of our other partners. So there'll be more to say about that soon, but no specifics to pass along right at this moment in that regard. But really, overall, the biggest benefit is that you're creating a better environment for your residents and starting to making it easy for people to make the healthy choice on a daily basis. And very quickly, so that we can get on to our other speakers, a city or town joins the campaign by having the city or town council pass a resolution. The resolution sets forth some goals that the city or town wants to work toward, and then the campaign will help you achieve those goals and try to make your vision a reality for you and your residents. So that was very quick overview of the campaign, and I'd love to talk with anybody, on the phone, or feel free to email me, and we can go into more specifics. But now I will turn it over to Libby to tell us about the great work that Aurora is doing.
Hi, I'm Libby Tart-Schoenfelder, and I'm going to be covering a little bit of the initial Aurora work, working toward a resolution on the HEAL document. We've only recently begun to work on a HEAL resolution, and our status is currently considered active, active. And so we're in process with our resolution, but I'm going to kind of go over where we are, where we were, and where we are today. So currently, prior to 2010, we revised our 2009 comprehensive plan to include a sustainability plan. And one of the elements in our plan included community gardens and our work to support them through land use planning and regulations. And we cross-referenced in our plan continued coordination with Denver Urban Gardens, which is a wonderfully supportive organization that provides a little bit of seed money to community gardens throughout the Denver metro area. From 2010 on, we've seen an upswing in the amount of calls and walk-ins from the community at the City of Aurora, anything from questions about basically starting a community garden in an existing open space area of an older neighborhood to integrating community gardens into a new site plan for the Aurora Housing Authority at one of their multifamily developments. So Aurora Water's Water Conservation Division and the Planning Department have traditionally responded to these phone calls and walk-ins and have kind of muddled through the process in encouraging these gardens because we didn't have a proper procedure set up. In 2010, due to a lot of these inquiries from Aurora Water and Planning, the City Manager's Office has began coordinating work on a community garden handbook with a variety of the departments that you see up on your screen. This was a written document that would assist anybody that was coming into our department or into Aurora Water with questions, basic questions, and the handbook was coordinated with all of these departments in mind. So this is kind of a map of some of our community garden locations prior to 2010, and we only had 3 that were public gardens, and I have to preface this as public gardens where people could enlist in a community garden. They didn't have to be members of a formal HOA or what have you. By 2010, 2011, we had 6 additional gardens, so it got us up to 9. And then by 2012, we were up to a total of 13 gardens with the potential for one more garden that's kind of hatched in gray. And these gardens are actually schools, they're open space, parks and open space. They're also church-related gardens, but anybody can enlist in these gardens that are around the City of Aurora. We actually have 35 additional gardens. Well, we have a total of 35 public and private gardens listed at this time. So over 2/3 of them are actually private gardens, and they've been owned and maintained by homeowner associations or various schools and nonprofits that are closing them off to their particular communities, like a homeless shelter or a particular elementary school that doesn't want the public to partake in particular. The HEAL resolution that Aurora has started with LiveWell supports a number of transportation and active living items which are already integrated into our municipal code, which is why we have the active status. And our comprehensive plan and city council goals also incorporate these. However, gardening and greenhouses is one item that we currently do not address in our code. And the resolution is really helping us to initiate those updates to the code on the subjects of community gardening and urban agriculture. And the resolution so far has gone to a Quality of Life Committee in July, just this last month, and it's going to a council study session this upcoming Monday, August 12th. And if all goes well, Council will then forward it to a regular session, and we'll be hearing the resolution by the end of August or possibly early September. So, so these are a few of the steps that we've taken thus far since the resolution has been undergoing. We've set up an internal task force, and with a lot of our sustainability code updates, we've reached out to other internal departments for feedback prior to writing an ordinance and receiving stakeholder input. And so we've kicked off a charrette that incorporated the Aurora Water Department, the Building Department, Neighborhood Services, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space, and have really honed in on 3 particular subject areas that will address our food systems ordinance. And those are community gardens, greenhouses, and urban agriculture. And I'm just going to break out a little bit of that and kind of the planning-related issues that and interdepartmental issues that we may have with each of these 3, and therefore this internal task force is really valuable to us. The first is community gardens. This is a very happy, touchy-feely sort of piece of the ordinance, but we do need to break out definitions in our zoning code to address these items, and they need additional structuring to ensure our citizens understand what they need to do when they are approaching the city about creating a community garden. And so some of the areas that we really are having to address with this task force are whether or not you have an accessory community garden or a principal community garden. Another item is encouraging gardens as an amenity, which gardens are becoming very popular assets in shared spaces and in new and old neighborhoods, and we really want to encourage it in our code so that it becomes an amenity like a pool would or a gazebo would or what have you. Another item is to just demonstrate. We already have front yard standards that allow for vegetables to be grown in people's front yards, but I don't think a lot of the public really knows about that. And so just demonstrating how those existing front yard landscaping standards allow for vegetables to be grown and what your landscape could look like if you had a lot of vegetables in your front yard. So, and then the main concern out of the 3 is really the greenhouse piece of our ordinance, which currently with medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, our department really hasn't wanted to touch the greenhouse expansion, and so we're going to have to ride a very fine line on how we define greenhouses and where they are located in the city, and making sure that they are very food production oriented rather than just being a universal greenhouse definition. So so we've finally gotten the support to do a little bit more with vegetable greenhouses, and right now they're allowed as a commercial business, but some of our key concerns are defining whether or not they're accessory, they're added into a residential backyard, or if they're principal in nature, where I have a screenshot of the Grow House in Denver, which is an urban farm and educational center, and we've been very concerned about that. We want something like this at the city of Aurora. We want to allow for uses like this, and how do we make it appropriate in our zoning code to allow a wonderful facility, a wonderful nonprofit like this. Size constraints are another issue that we have in our agricultural areas. You can't have more than 50% of an accessory structure the size of the residential home, and a lot of our residential homes have been about 1,500 square feet. So if you want to encourage year-round agriculture production and year-round food production, it can be a challenge if somebody can only have a 700 square foot greenhouse in their yard, especially if that's their home occupation. So we're concerned about the size constraints and addressing those in our code. Hoop houses have been an obstacle also, and that's something that we're working with building and code enforcement on. and just ensuring that the structural integrity of them are addressed. And we're also going to be addressing aquaponics, which I'm showing that in that picture with the grow house. But the planning department does not work with animal-related issues. Instead, that's enforced by a different department. So whenever we've come into focus with chickens or bees or what have you, the planning department doesn't have any, we don't have the control to make a chicken ordinance happen or that sort of thing. So we're going to have to work with another department to address a little bit of the aquaponics. Moving on, urban agriculture. Our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Department is evaluating several sites for urban agricultural leases in the way of maybe a restaurant wanting to lease out some of the land to grow vegetables for the restaurant. And the closest thing we have right now is the Delaney Farm, which is run with the Denver Urban Gardens, and it's a CFA located across the street from our offices. We're really wanting to encourage ventures like this, so we just need to properly define it and address size constraints and proper locations throughout the city. And then the next steps for us are just to continue our research throughout the summer and to tour various sites, make sure that we're addressing exactly what the community needs with our code. And then we're drafting these standards and seeking public input from stakeholders. We're hoping that this happens throughout the fall, and then we're going to be taking an ordinance to City Council by late 2013 or early 2014. And I thank you all for having me here.
Great. Thanks, Libby. So now we'll turn it over to Kirsten with the City of Cortez. So Kirsten, take it away.
Hi, everyone. This is Kirsten Sackett. I was introduced earlier, but I am the Director of Planning with the City of Cortez. And really what I'm going to talk about today is our process of how we got to become a Hail City and kind of walk you through the timeline and the steps that we took. Next slide. So first of all, I really wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of Cortez, where we're at, kind of what our demographics are. I've got a map on this that you can see up here, and Cortez is located pretty much in the center there at the intersection of a couple of highways, Highway 491 and 160. And we're a small population, about 8,500, in a county of about 25,000. And we're surrounded by open space and public lands. You'll see to the north the green, that's all U.S. Forest Service. The orange is BLM. BIA is the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and that's land owned by the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. And then you've got the National Park Service, which is Mesa Verde National Park. So as you look at that, you can see that the people that live in Cortez are really accustomed to having open space, public lands, and agriculture surrounding them. Now, only 28% of the county is privately held land, and the majority of that is really used for agricultural purposes, if I can talk. And so I share that with you just to point out the rural character of our community. On the next slide, I'm just going to point out a brief timeline of food policy-related events that occurred in Cortez, and then I'm going to talk through each of these a little bit more on future slides. But it really started out with our adoption of what I would call a progressive comprehensive plan. Progressive for this area in the fact that it's a pretty conservative county down here. But the policies in the comprehensive plan are really far-reaching and pretty well put us in a step for achieving what we've done throughout the years. In 2011, that was another important year, LiveWell Montezuma began really partnering with the city to begin working on food policy. Prior to that, their focus had been really the built environment, and so they decided to shift focus, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. In addition, that year, a member of the public approached the city about adopting or creating a community garden in the area. So that kind of started up some new conversations. In 2012, we actually did adopt an ordinance for community gardens. And then this year, 2013, we adopted a backyard chicken ordinance. And in June, we became a Hail City. And then moving on to the next slide, I was just going to give you a few snippets out of our comprehensive plan. As I alluded to before, this is a really rural area, and that is one of the things that people that live in the city of Cortez value about living here is the surroundings, the landscape. Sometimes people have a hard time putting into words what it is they love so much, but we are just surrounded by so much wonderful land. You look out and have these great views, and you know you have access to agriculture. And so we have a chapter that's dedicated solely to the community character and culture, and how do we keep that and maintain that. So we've got objectives about, you know, creating a genuine feeling of community pride and maintaining the real character of the community. And how do you do that, really? It's kind of one of those more ethereal type topics. It's not like transportation or housing, but it's something that was so important here that we made a whole chapter dedicated to that. And we have several associated policies that support the creation of rooftop gardens. Well, that's actually the next slide, but we look at supporting buy local programs, supporting a farm-to-school program, supporting the consumption of locally grown food. So there's a lot of policies in our comp plan that allude to that. And then on the next slide, as I was alluding to, we have another chapter that's dedicated to the natural environment and how do we preserve and enhance the natural physical environment within the city of Cortez itself. And in this picture, that's Mesa Verde escarpment out that you can see from anywhere in Cortez. It's beautiful, and it's something that people love. And how do we also maintain a healthy urban landscape throughout the community? So we've got policies that support, you know, creating regulations for community gardens, rooftop gardens, promoting urban forestry. We've got policies in there about working with CDOT to design low-maintenance vegetated medians. As I noted previously, we are dissected by 2 state highways, so CDOT is basically a force that we have to work with, and we do have medians in there. And we have a completely other topic I could take all day to talk about, but we're working with them right now to beautify our medians. On the next slide, I want to point out that in 2011, that's when we really started working more heavily with LiveWell Montezuma. They approached the city and said, hey, our focus is shifting, and we want you to partner with us, and we know that food policy is really important, and we need city support so that we can adopt ordinances and policies that will help achieve this. And so they sent me and a LiveWell staff member to the Food Policy Conference in Portland, Oregon. And tell you what, we came back armed, full of new ideas and methods for achieving this type of work. LiveWell Montezuma immediately began engaging in the arduous task of creating a food assessment report. I joined a food task force created by LiveWell Montezuma. We've spent the last 2 years working on that, and just last month finalized that food assessment report. Going back to my own little planning world, I came back with ideas on how we could start updating the land use code and adopting new policies. But one of the most important things I learned was that we really needed to rely on the public, and that I couldn't do it all alone. That I needed to pull in other staff members, other departments, other organizations in the community, as well as work with community members to bring this all to fruition. On the next slide, I just gave a little bit of the process of how we came to adopting the community garden ordinance. As I noted, we originally had somebody approach the city and say, hey, I want to put a community garden on a vacant piece of property I own. I said, we don't have any regulations, but this would be great. Come talk to our planning commission about it. Let's talk through it. They invited their neighbors, and unfortunately, neither of them liked the idea. They did not support it at all, and so the landowner backed out, said, never mind, I don't want to push the issue. But it opened up that conversation with the Planning Commission. And then shortly after that, the beginning of 2012, we had somebody else, an organization that they called themselves the Cortez Community Garden, Inc. They found a plot of land owned by a church. They were proposing to put a community garden there. We didn't have regs in place, but we said, go ahead. You know what? Let's do this on a temporary basis. City Council ended up giving them the authority to operate through the 2012 growing season. In the meantime, we worked on adopting regulations. So in September of 2012, we did adopt a formal community garden ordinance. It has very minimal regulations. We added new definitions to the land use code for urban agriculture, home garden, community garden, greenhouse, hoop house, and cold frame as structures that we would allow in community gardens. We updated our schedule of use regulations. We listed household gardens, and we said that was a permitted use in all zoning districts. And then for community gardens, is permitted in all zoning districts except a single-family residential where it's a conditional use permit. And it's that way based on some of the conversations we had that the residents felt like they wanted to have the opportunity to come out and have a say as to whether or not to have the garden there. And that could work out differently in any community depending on the input you receive. On the next slide, I really talk about the process of adopting the backyard chicken ordinance. Now, I'll say when I first came to the Planning Commission with a proposal for a community garden ordinance, I got a little bit carried away, got pretty excited. It was this all-encompassing urban agricultural ordinance. And I had in there not only the gardens, but how do we regulate urban farms and chickens and bees and other small farm animals. And they said, well, let's step back. Let's just focus on the community gardens because that's a fairly benign topic. So we were able to get that through, but then after that passed, they said, all right, let's go back to working on the chicken ordinance. And they said, let's get some more public input. And they directed staff to go ahead and reach out to the community and put extra effort into that. And it just so happened that we were going to be hosting some block parties in the community. The City of Cortez was selected as a Heart and Soul Community Planning Grant Award recipient. It's a $100,000 award over a 2-year period, and it's really about reaching out to the public, going to people where they are, finding out what they value and love about the community. And so we had these block parties already planned for the Heart and Soul effort, and so we threw in a paper survey with a simple question: would you support chickens in the city, yes or no, why or why not? When that was all said and done, I brought it back to the Planning Commission. I said, here's what I heard. Do you want me to try to get the paper to run another story, get more information? I said, no, this is great. So we moved forward with it, and in March of this year, we did adopt a backyard chicken ordinance, and we try to keep that fairly minimal as well. It limits property owners to having 6 female hens and no roosters, which I understand is pretty common. They have to be kept in the rear yard, and they have to have an enclosure or a hen house in that backyard, and that enclosure has to be at least 10 feet from property line. And we also have other things about making sure it's clean and odor-free and things like that. The same year, June of 2013, as I mentioned earlier, the Hill City campaign. The city did adopt a resolution in June joining the LiveWell Colorado Healthy Eating Active Living campaign. And it really was a natural consequence of all the work we had done prior. In 2008, of course, this wasn't something that was out there, but it allowed us to move forward with all these future items with community gardens and the chickens and other items that we'll take on in the future. And we have committed to continuing on that work, making sure that we're continuing to be partners with the built environment through parks, trails, sidewalks. I'd like to point out that we have 12.9% of the city is actually dedicated to parks, open space, trails, and we're really proud of the fact, and we want to make sure that stays consistent as we grow in the future. We're supporting workplace wellness programs, and the amount of things that the city is committed to doing and looking forward to doing is just exciting. But then going on to the next slide, I just wanted to briefly touch on how we got here. And I've talked through it during the slides, but with the comprehensive plan, we did have 12 separate topical meetings for each chapter of the plan. When we created the draft plan, we brought it back to the Planning Commission, City Council, Public. We had joint meetings, and we actually talked through every single proposed objective, goal, and policy. We had them printed up on big sheets of paper. Sometimes we scratched them out. We wordsmithed. We worked through that a lot and felt really comfortable that we were representing the community. But at the same time, we knew that we really didn't get out to everybody, but we tried our hardest. With the community garden ordinance, we made a little bit more effort to make sure the public hearings were advertised. But by the time we got to the chicken ordinance and we were working on the Heart and Soul project, we realized that people really are not going to come to us. They're not going to come to City Hall. They may not read those notices in the paper that are back in the legals. They're so small. So we made a lot more effort to send out postcards, put ads on the radio, just reach out to people in a different way. And we found for our particular area, word of mouth, email seems to be the most effective. We don't get a lot of bang for a buck with radio or postcards, but there's still effective ways, and you just need to learn what works for your community. On the next slide, I just kind of pointed out some of the partners. Collaborating is key to this. Engaged citizens are number one. You've really got to reach out to your community members. I listed the City of Cortez, but it's all the departments as well. We really did have to work with the police department, the building official, animal control when we were working on the chicken regulations. Heart and Soul, we have a community advisory team that are really dedicated to reaching out to the public on any topic that council says, hey, let's work on this. LiveWell Montezuma was a key player in this, as well as the health department, CSU Extension. We have a farm to school and school to farm program, and then over the last year, a new startup program started called the Montezuma Valley Farm Hub. So it was really a combination of all these people working together that brought a lot of this to pass. And finally, on the next slide, what worked and what did not work, lessons learned. The fact that the community garden ordinance was driven by the public and not staff was very important. I came back from the conference ready to rock and roll, but I knew I needed to kind of lay low for a while and let things play out the way they would. Keeping the Planning Commission, the City Council members involved and engaged in the process up front is key. I think most of us know that it doesn't do much good to plan without their knowledge, because when it comes to adoption, you need their support. We were able to refer back to our 2008 adopted comp plan policies whenever we were promoting the community garden, and the chickens. It's like, look, it's in our ordinance or a comp plan back from 2008. So this is something that we have already said we want to do in our community, and so that made it so much easier. The expanded public engagement really made people feel like they were part of that decision-making process, created more public awareness. Another great thing was there are a lot of good resources out there, but I'm going to say what did not work right now, that I was unaware of Colorado LiveWell, or LiveWell Colorado's library and their support that they had in place even before the Hill campaign. So I spent a lot of time doing research, but there's a lot of good stuff out there. And really going to that food policy conference was, for me, a key thing. But I think that people don't necessarily need to attend that, but that helped us in expanding our horizons and knowing what other places were doing. And then I already talked a little bit about what did not work so well. Conducting that research was really, really time-consuming. We have limited staff, limited time to prepare reports, ordinances, and do that research. So I would recommend that anybody looking to start working on the Hill campaign, make sure that the leaders are on board with this and that they're directing staff to saying, it's okay, go ahead and take the time. This is an important policy or goal for the city. And so then on the next slide, the next two slides, I'm not going to really read through them, but they're just the resources that I utilize. And if you want to get your hands on them, I believe you'll be able to get them after the webinar is over, or you can answer or ask me questions. On this last slide, it's got my email, my phone number, and then I included a picture of a great view that we have that illustrates a great landscape. So that's all I've got for today. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry we're having to move a little bit more quickly due to our technical difficulties, but yes, all the slides will be available afterwards. Thank you for that great presentation. And now we'll turn it over to Lindsay with the City of Fort Collins.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'll try and move through my slides probably a little bit more quickly than I'd planned, because I know having your questions answered is really important to all of us. So again, I'm Lindsay X. I'm a Senior Environmental Planner with the City of Fort Collins. And if you aren't familiar with us, we are a part of the Front Range on the northern end, and we have a city of over 140,000 people. We're about 55 square miles. And on the next slide, you can see, just like many of our communities in Colorado, we are an agricultural community with a rich history. And we already had passed allowing chicken hens in 2008, very similarly to what Cortez has recently done. And we've supported community gardens for quite a while through in the city and through a program that we have with the gardens on Spring Creek. But in our 2011 comprehensive plan update, what we call City Plan, we had 3 different chapters that spoke to supporting local food production. But on the next slide, we realized that only 4 of our 25 zone districts allowed urban agriculture as a principal use on the land. While we did allow home gardens all throughout the city, we only allowed urban agriculture in the areas on this map that you can see in orange. But on the next slide, you can see that these types of land uses weren't really confined to those 4 zone districts. And so the next slide shows our project goal. We were looking to identify how our regulations can support these types of practices, while also ensuring compatibility with not only our existing but our future land uses, both when and where appropriate. So we wanted to know how they fit into our urban fabric. So on the next slide, we've outlined 3 phases of this project that we went under. And of course, it was more iterative than it looks on this screen. But our first phase was to understand. Then we wanted to develop, test, and refine that understanding, and then finally get our new regulations adopted so that we were better aligned with our community's comprehensive plan. And in each of the phases, public dialogue, staff research and desired outcomes were really important to us. And so in the phase 1, we were really focused on developing an understanding as planners and as a city of what was already going on in the community and what the community really wanted. So how did they see us implementing those policies that we have in our city plan? So we first launched a project website so that anybody in the city could find out more about what we were doing. And we held 2 focus groups. We held one with interested citizens and local producers to see what they were already doing and then what they would like to be practicing if there weren't barriers in place for them to be doing that type of work. And we also held a focus group with folks who thought, or we thought, might be concerned about the regulations. So we invited homeowners association representatives, we invited realtors, and we invited some outspoken citizens of ours to better understand what their concerns might be. And we also formed a project team that included not just planning department, but neighborhood services and the folks that were going to be doing the enforcement, especially if we brought forward any animal regulations. We got them involved really early on. And we developed 2 documents. One was about team success, or our team norms, and another was about project success. And we used those documents to guide our project to make sure that we were on track. And we also outreached quite a bit to our boards and commissions. And so when we came to staff research on the next slide, the first thing that we did was we researched what existing documents and other planning documents were out there. But beyond just looking at what other people were doing, we wanted to hear directly from them so we could get some lessons learned. So our staff team split up and we contacted 8 or 9 different communities, and we asked them the 4 questions that you can see on the screen. You know, how long have you had your urban agricultural codes in place? And they were generally recent. How extensive was your outreach? Generally a lot. The biggest surprise for a lot of people were the level of support that they received for adopting these types of regulations. And then for almost everybody, animals became an issue, and we were no exception to that. But in the outcome of this, phase 1, which is on the next slide, we came up with a project summary document, which we were able to use when we were doing any outreach and messaging, especially with the media, to talk about our strategies and our goals. And you can see the strategies on this slide. You know, we wanted to identify what the existing practices and barriers were, what practices were acceptable to the community and where they'd be appropriate, creating a set of standards for the regulations themselves. And we wanted to make sure that public outreach and engagement was a key priority for us throughout the process. So looking forward to phase 2, now that we had an understanding of what we were doing, we wanted to again, develop, test, and refine that understanding. So we held an online survey, and we had over 600 respondents to that. We also held a focus group with local farmers once we developed the regulations. We held a public open house with almost 100 attendees, that's a great response from our community. And we met with 6 different city boards and commissions. And I'll just show you some of their survey results because we get asked this a lot. When we asked if people supported allowing urban agriculture in mower zone districts, we heard 96% support. And in each of these slides, you'll see the concerns that were listed down below, and we used those concerns to draft our regulations. In the next slide, we asked about farmers markets. Should those also be allowed in more locations throughout the city? And again, we got resounding support for that. And in the final survey slide, we asked about animals. And we were surprised by the support that we got for allowing different animals within the city. We did hear some concerns again, but over 90% support gave us a strong indication that we should move forward with those regulations as well. So on the next slide, one of the items that we have done and we've shared with LiveWell Colorado, and I believe you can access through them now, we benchmarked our proposed regulations against all these different communities that you can see on the screen, both locally within Colorado and nationally. So we've compiled all of these different regulations so you can see how the different communities compare. And the outcome of this phase was on the next slide, were the draft of the 2 ordinances, allowing urban agriculture in all zone districts subject to a license. So everybody does have to come in and get a license through us, but you don't have to go through a development review process. We allowed farmers markets in mixed-use zone districts, and our municipal code, we're going to propose to allow ducks, scale poultry based on lot size. So we adopted back in 2008, just like Cortez, allowing 6 chicken hens per lot. But one of the concerns that we had heard is, well, I have 4 acres. How come I'm only limited to 6 chicken hens as well? Or I have an acre, I have a half an acre. So now we're scaling that number based on lot size, and then allowing goats within the city. And when we got to phase 3, we met with City Council with a work session, and we were very lucky to have unanimous support from them. And we used that time to talk about broader concepts as well. And we'll be going back this fall to talk with them more about hoop houses and year-round growing opportunities. But then between the work session and first reading, on the next slide, we met with our health department to ask if they had any concerns about our proposed regulations. And this is when all the fun began. The health department was very concerned with a disease that's called Q fever. And it's a disease that is a bacteria, and it's prevalent. It can cause outbreaks in large farm areas, but we didn't have a really good understanding of the effects of Q fever on goats in an urban environment. And when we went to council, we had actually pulled our recommendation to allow goats within the city. But council overrided that. They said that the benefits outweighed the risks. And so when we came back for second reading, we said, okay, what do we need to do to minimize the risks to neighbors for allowing goats? And so we have annual licensing now, so you can tell where the goats are and how many there are. Education about minimizing the risks of Q fever, and a pre-inspection, which we're also requiring not just for goats, but also for chickens and ducks, to minimize any sort of conflicts that you'd have with neighbors up front. And I can talk about more on this if you have any questions. And we also are working with our partners at Colorado State University to launch the first study of Q fever in an urban environment that we are aware of, so we'll actually have a better understanding of the prevalence of this disease. And that'll be a 2-year study that we're hoping to launch this fall. So in the final slide, this just summarizes our 3 different phases that we were on, from understanding to developing, testing and refining and adopting. And then one of my final slides has our lessons learned. And first, you know, as the other speakers have said, collaboration is key. Definitely involve your health department early and often, especially if you're having a discussion about animals, and also include the people that are going to enforce your codes. And as planners, if you're on this call, you know, knowing that this is still a new topic for us, and so emphasize listening over coming up with the policies first, because the community is really the expert in this issue. And then for folks that aren't working for a city on this call, you know, the city is your partner. And though our codes may act as a barrier right now, it's not our intention. In many cases, it's just kind of the way it's always been done. And so we want to work with you and see your city as a partner. And then learning from others. Yes, like others have said, there are a wealth of resources out there, but I encourage you to talk with those other communities because you learn so much from talking from somebody as opposed to just reading what they've done. And I'll just close with using every opportunity that you have talking about this issue to communicate your long-term goals as well. We used that opportunity with council when we had them to test out some other ideas that we were considering, and we were able to get that feedback from them early on. So use every opportunity you have to do that. And then finally, just a thank you to everybody that has been involved in this process. This has really been a community effort. We are so lucky, as many of you are, to have such a great community behind all of us. So with that, I'll conclude my section of the presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you to all of our presenters. We do have another minute or two for questions to come in for any of our panelists here today. Again, you can type your question into your on-screen control panel, and we will read those aloud and answer them here today. Additionally, these slides that you see in front of you, as well as a recording of this webinar, will be available tomorrow on the LiveWell Colorado website, as well as in a follow-up email that will be sent to everybody that registered and attended for today's webinar. So this information will be available again. We had to fly through them a little bit more quickly than planned because of technical difficulties, but the information will be available to you both on our website and in a follow-up email. So we'll take another moment to wait for any questions to come in. We don't have any up there right now, but I'm going to fast forward to contact information for our speakers and information on our next webinar. All right, well, we don't have any questions coming in right now, so in interest of everybody else's time, we just want to thank you again for joining us for our webinar. Keep an eye out for our upcoming webinar on September 12th, and thank you all for joining us today.